Hello, Knox County students. I'm Elizabeth Levitt and I teach at Powell Middle School. Today's lesson is based on the week 1 assignment for grade 8 ELA. If you don't have this assignment, it can be found on the KCS website at knoxschools.org. You'll want to click where it says Student Resources. If you would like to have this lesson printed, the middle school packets are handed out on Mondays between 10 a.m. and 12 noon at each of our meal distribution sites. A list of those sites can be found under the Meal Distribution tab at the KCS website. Please be sure to complete the entire week's assignment before continuing this video. That's important, okay? Like I said, if you haven't completed the entire week 1 assignments for grade 8 ELA, please stop and return to the video once you have finished all of your work so that we can go over it together, okay? Let's get started. Okay, so Monday we asked you to read the article, of course, for the first read and annotate it. Consider annotating by underlining key ideas. That's always important. Circling unknown vocabulary words and asking questions you have about the text in the margins. In addition to that, you certainly could make connections. I know I did. I will show you that in a minute. You could visualize and add some images. Whatever tools you have in your toolbox for annotating, that's great. And I annotated my article using Kami, K-A-M-I. And this week we wanted you to read about an accidental invention, one that I would say every single person of nearly every age universally is familiar with, the popsicle. So this was titled How an 11-Year-Old Boy Invented the Popsicle. Before I share some of my annotating with you and think aloud a little bit on what I was thinking with those, I wanted to go ahead and do the first read with you. How an 11-year-old boy invented the popsicle. Frank Epperson is responsible for inventing the popsicle at 11 years old in 1905. What started as a delicious accident evolved into a worldwide phenomenon that is still enjoyed today. Epperson's original invention has changed much since the idea's conception in 1905, changing hands between big companies, feeling the effects of the Great Depression, and sparking heated debates. Regardless, the popsicle has maintained its reputation as an iconic icy treat. As you read, take notes on how Frank Epperson's frozen treat became such a success. Okay, we're going to go ahead and start, of course, with paragraph 1. You will see my annotations on the screen. But listen first, and then I will go back and share some of those with you, and you will have an opportunity to compare and contrast your annotating with mine and extend your thinking there. The next time you pop a popsicle in your mouth, think about this. You're enjoying the fruits of an 11-year-old entrepreneur's labor. Back in 1905, a San Francisco Bay Area kid by the name of Frank Epperson accidentally invented the summertime treat. He had mixed some sugary soda powder with water and left it out overnight. It was a cold night and the mixture froze. In the morning, Epperson devoured the icy concoction, licking it off the wooden stir. He declared it an Epsicle, a portmanteau of icicle and his name, and started selling the treat around his neighborhood. In 1923, Epperson decided to expand sales beyond his neighborhood. He started selling the treat at Neptune Beach, a nearby amusement park. Dubbed a West Coast Coney Island, the park featured roller coasters, baseball, and an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Neptune flourished in the pre-Depression days, and consumers eagerly consumed Epsicles and snow cones, which also made their debut at Neptune. Buoyed by this success, Epperson applied for a patent for his frozen confection of attractive appearance, which can be conveniently consumed without contamination by contact with the hand and without the need for a plate, spoon, fork, or other implement, in 1924. The patent illustrates the requirements for a perfect ice pop, including recommendations on the best wood for the stick. wood, bass, birch, and poplar. Eventually, Epperson's children urged him to change the ice pop's name to what they called it, a popsicle or popsicle. This origin story is charming, if somewhat apocryphal. Sources differ on the details, but it didn't have a happy ending for the inventor. A broke Epperson sold the rights to his creation to the Joe Low Company in the 1920s, much to his regret. I was flat and had to liquidate all my assets, he later said. I haven't been the same since. The Low Company went on to catapult Epperson's invention to national success. During the Great Depression, the company debuted the two-stick version of the popsicle to help consumers stretch their dollar. The duo sold for 5 cents. But this delicious duo faced competition from Good Humor, which had recently debuted its own chocolate-covered ice cream on a stick, and Lowe was sued for copyright infringement. The courts compromise: Popsicle could sell water-based treats, and Good Humor could sell ice cream pops. Popsicle tested the limits of the agreement, selling a milk popsicle, and the two companies tussled in court about the definitions of sherbet and ice cream over the years through a series of lawsuits. The giant food corporation Unilever scooped up the Popsicle brand in 1989, expanding the brand beyond its original fruity flavors. It also bought Good Humor, ending the feud between the two icy competitors. Over the years, Epperson's childhood invention has achieved iconic status, standing in for any frozen treat the way Kleenex means a tissue. That explains why also over the years, Unilever has worked to keep the name Popsicle its and its alone. In 2010, the company threatened legal action against artisan Brooklyn ice pop makers People's Pops for using the word popsicle on its blog. As for Epperson, he died in 1983 and is buried in Oakland's Mountain View Cemetery, where he's featured on a tour celebrating local food luminaries, including chocolate mogul Domingo Garradelli and Mai Tai inventor Victor Trader Vic Bergeron. His story lives on in many forms, from the official Popsicle website, where it's illustrated in comic form, to an inspirational Christian self-help book about trusting in God's grand plan for your life. Epperson's childhood invention, born randomly on a freezing night, has also proved to be resoundingly successful and long-lived. These days, some 2 billion popsicles are sold each year. Okay, so we did the first read aloud, and we were to annotate. And as I share some of mine and think aloud through those, compare and contrast those with yours, and even add to either now or pause the video or however you wish to do that, okay? So in the pre-reading paragraph here at the top, I asked a question, and my questions, by the way, are in the blue text that I've added. So up at the top, I said, what was the historical context in our country? 1905 is a very long time ago, especially for you. And I think it's important and it's very meaningful to know perhaps what's going on during that time. And I know the article mentions the Great Depression. So my question was, what exactly was the historical context? And that certainly would lead me to further inquiry and help me to make connections. Moving on, I have green circled or boxed unfamiliar words that I imagined a student may struggle with, or it may be unfamiliar, or maybe the mastery is not there. So the first word I circled was phenomenon. And when I looked it up after using my context clues, it said worldwide phenomenon that is still enjoyed today. We said 1905 was a very long time ago, so I thought it must mean attention-getting or incredible. And I looked it up, and it means a remarkable event or thing. And certainly most of us would agree, if not all, that popsicles are remarkable. And then you'll see where I underlined the key ideas or events, or details rather. So the red underline in the pre-reading, I put a little purple word out to the right of the margin. It sounded to me like it was a summary ahead of time to help guide my reading. So I will read that quickly. Epperson's original invention has changed much since the idea's conception in 1905, changing hands between big companies, feeling the effects of the Great Depression, and sparking heated debates. Regardless, the popsicle has maintained its reputation as an iconic icy treat. So to me, that was very important, and it guided my brain as I read. And then the paragraphs, of course, offered the descriptive details for those main ideas. And then I just highlighted in blue my task. In addition to annotating, take notes on how this frozen treat became such a success. Moving on, I used a visual symbol. Probably many of you do this as well, but I placed a big red question mark anytime I added a question. And that just helps me as a reader to go back and either build on those questions, answer those questions, or allow it to bring about research for me. So the visual is powerful for me. And then you'll notice I have two little overlapping ovals, and that just means that I made a connection there. So I used those two large symbols throughout. And then anytime you see the pink highlighted places, that's where I was underlining, but I highlighted instead anything that I thought was very, very important as a main idea or key detail. So starting with the first paragraph, I had a question in the blue text. How does this metaphor hook the reader? So I have my big question mark, and then I am referring to the yellow, soft yellow highlight. You're enjoying the fruits of an 11-year-old entrepreneur's labor. So I made my ELA connection. The metaphor is powerful to hook my reader and get me to thinking. And the metaphor, of course, is also a little bit of a pun, because popsicles are often fruity, and he did work to develop this, even if it were accidentally. So I thought that metaphor was powerful as a hook. And then I've got my pink highlighted. Most of the first sentences in every paragraph would be a key detail, because we know, or a main idea, because we know that those are topic sentences, and oftentimes the author's craft and structure in an informational text, of course, is that the topic sentences, sometimes the second sentences, often the first, have that main idea. So you will see that I did that throughout. I won't go over every single one of them, but the first one here, that's in pink, it introduces the accidental invention, that broad main idea. And then my unfamiliar words, I circled or boxed in green. Portmanteau was quite easy for me to figure out, because it says he declared it an epsicle, a portmanteau of icicle and his name, and I know they are mixed together or blended, and so I know that's a combination, and that is at the bottom as well. But again, I wanted to practice my context clues strategies. Now, in the green text that I've added, you'll see the symbol there, the chain links, because I'm making that connection. So the first one, I said, my siblings and I have had, or made and had, enjoyed many. And I'm referring to in the paragraph where he says that he mixed some sugary soda powder with water. Oftentimes when I was young with my siblings, we created popsicles. We would stick the saran wrap and the toothpicks over ice cube trays, and we would make those, not accidentally. Of course, my mother guided us, but that was a strong connection for me to realize historically, oh, somebody accidentally did that, and that's why we're doing this, and that's why we have real popsicles. And then in the blue, again, I have a question. Did adults in his life guide him this way? Who? And I'm referring to where it says he decided to expand sales beyond his neighborhood and selling them in his neighborhood as a child. Did somebody influence him? I think that's always important. When we read about somebody, we want to know if there were influences. So who possibly pushed him? And I certainly could research that and probably find some of that information out. Again, I've got a connection here. I felt like an entrepreneur selling lemonade and hot dogs as a child. That is certainly a meaningful connection, text to self for me as a reader, because I can identify with what he was doing even in 1923. And me as a child, I felt like that as well. And I have a question over here in blue text with my big symbol. Question mark, who invented the snow cone? I will research to discover this. Was it an accident? Was it an experiment? And I can look that up and find that up as well. And again, you'll see I've broken down by highlighting. You certainly could have underlined. We mentioned to underline those things. I decided to highlight. That's my toolbox preference. So he expanded his sales up here. He changed the name in the context of his family and his children. I bet that was new info for many of you. That's why it's called a popsicle. The children, referring to their dad as Pop, said, let's change it to Popsicle. You made it, Dad. And then moving on down, again, I have some connections. Oh, this one I will mention. I thought this one was a powerful text to real world, text to current events. So I said, I connected this to the way many Americans are feeling now during a crisis time. And I'm referring to where he regrets that he sold the rights and he had to liquidate all of his assets because he was broke. So that's the way he problem solved, even though he regretted it later, because of course it became very lucrative, very successful. So I said, right now, many in America are facing financial difficulties and doing their own problem solving by liquidating and layoffs and other things as adults. And certainly, it is a very different time for us right now. That's why you're watching Ms. Levitt on a video instead of the classroom. So I continued to highlight my key details, my main ideas. Here, the invention to national success after it was sold. And then we have some historical context here, the Great Depression, and I had already as a reader wanted to inquire about that in the pre-reading. The duo faced competition. Remember, they were talking about the two companies, and it was court settled. And the topic sentence here, over the years, Epperson's childhood invention has achieved iconic status. And I know that the author is bringing me back to the main idea that this was an invention by a child. It was accidental, and it is world known and iconic and a phenomenon, like we said. And then I have here that he died. I think that's a key detail. It ties to the year, and in context, it continues here. And I did highlight the entire last paragraph. Many times an author will wrap an informational text up by reiterating some main ideas, key details, and in this case, I certainly think it did, although we find out some new information as well here. And then you'll see that I circled or boxed in green resoundingly. And remember, when you circle your unknown words, you want to go back and figure them out in context best you can, and then check with a resource and plug that new learning into that sentence. Grow your thinking, grow your vocabulary. And I have a question up here in my visual. So yeah, that's how I chose to annotate. Hopefully you gained some ideas. You were able to compare and contrast your own annotating, and maybe you realize I'm not finished annotating yet as a student. And you can always go back and add those. So let me close this. And on Wednesday, we asked you to paraphrase. We wanted you to talk about it on Tuesday. Okay, I just wanted to remind you what paraphrase means. Simply enough, it means to express the meaning of the writer using different words, and that would be your own words. And this is important to do because it definitely brings clarity. You're putting it in student-friendly or self-friendly words, and then as you share it back out, you're gaining a deeper understanding as well. So that would be you expressing to a parent or somebody at home, even walking away from the text physically, maybe just by recall, putting it in your own words. You know, there was a boy that invented the popsicle, and you could have your text there or your digital format and share your annotations and your thoughts as well. And what are the main ideas and key details? And you would talk about that in your own words. Companies fought over this after Mr. Epperson sold his idea, and he regretted it really bad. He said it was the worst thing he ever did. Well, the article didn't really say that, but he said, I haven't been the same ever since. So putting that into your own words, making a little more meaning of it, providing clarity for you. We certainly hope that you did that on Tuesday. If you didn't, you could stop and do it now. Okay, so for Wednesday, you wrote a summary. Remember, if you're writing a summary of a text, an informational text, we call that an objective summary. So you don't want a personal opinion in this. You don't want it to be informal in tone. You want it to be formal. You want your best academic writing. Sentence structure should be varied and appropriate for grade level. So let me read mine, and then again, you will compare and contrast yours as well. Shelby Pope's article, How an 11-Year-Old Boy Invented the Popsicle, explains the accidental invention of the iconic popsicle in 1905 by Frank Epperson. After leaving a mix of water and sugary soda powder overnight in outside freezing temperature, Epperson ate the treat off the wooden stirrer. After calling it an Epsicle and selling them in his neighborhood, years later, in 1923, he sold them as an entrepreneur at Neptune Beach and applied for a patent. His children convinced him to change the name to Popsicle, thus Popsicle. Epperson sold the rights due to financial strain, and companies feuded over details for some time. The popsicle remains iconic, and Frank Epperson's story lives on as people enjoy these summertime treats. Okay, again, check yours. Take the time to check it according to what your teachers have taught you this year with summary. Remember, you don't want to include the minor details. They are wonderful to read. They are part of the text for a reason. They are carefully crafted by the author, but your summary needs to be concise. It needs to be formal in tone. Of course, it needs to have proper conventions, grammar, spelling, punctuation, and have a parent read it if you haven't yet, or somebody at home. Have somebody look over it, compare and contrast it, maybe pause the video there at the exemplar and see how you can improve. So if you can get to the Thursday questions, the first one is, what is one central idea presented in the text? Remember, central idea is really that big picture, analyzing what is the idea. If I put this all together, and oftentimes there's more than one central idea, but the idea is central. It runs throughout the text. And so, and I'm thinking out loud that we have this accidental invention of the popsicle, and we have some hard work on the point of the little boy, and then as he became a man, Frank Epperson. So I'm thinking an accidental invention, but hard work, this idea of entrepreneurship, the fact that companies debated, but it became very successful, the popsicle, and it certainly is an icon, and the article repeats that idea. So let me show you an exemplar. While originally an accident, Epperson helped to make the popsicle famous through his hard work. After Epperson was forced to sell his business, the popsicle continued to grow in popularity. Again, this isn't a summary. It's not paraphrase, putting it in your own words. It's determining the central idea, putting all of those pieces together as an idea, a big picture thought. So there's your exemplar for that one. And then number 2, asked you for a piece of evidence to support that central idea, at least one piece of evidence. And so one that would work for this central idea is, in 1923, Epperson decided, remember, we're thinking about the central idea. How did we get there? How did we determine it? Well, the author said that he made that conscious choice to expand sales beyond his neighborhood. So that powerfully supports the answer in number 1. And then we cited it as paragraph 3. A second piece of evidence that would support this central idea is Epperson's childhood invention, born randomly, again, reminding us of that part of the idea that it was accidental, random, on a freezing night, has also proved to be resoundingly successful and long-lived. So we're supporting that idea that the popsicle is very popular, it is iconic, it continued to grow, and those two pieces of evidence in number 2 would certainly support well and strongly our response in number 1. And then number 3 asked you, and it was multiple choice, of course, in the context of paragraph 2, what does the word portmanteau mean? If you remember, I annotated, circled, or boxed that unknown word for myself, and I thought through it with context clues, and I used the word combination. And so the answer to number 3 is C. A portmanteau is a combination. He took his last name, part of it, Epp, and then an icicle, and dropped that beginning of the icicle, and so he put those together, and you would see that there's a combination, a blending, epsicle. Number 4, which section from paragraph 2 best supports the answer to part A? So in other words, you got combination as the meaning of portmanteau, and what section from that paragraph best supports your answer? And so, of course, that would be D, the icicle plus part of his name. So part of each of those words, he created epsicle as a portmanteau. Friday is that culminating writing task that does involve the analysis. You're responding to a small writing prompt. We want you to pull the strongest evidence to support your claim, your topic sentence, and then we also want you to elaborate on your evidence somewhat and, of course, close the paragraph. On Friday, answer the following question in a complete paragraph. Include text evidence from the article. How was Frank Epperson impacted by his decision to sell the rights to the popsicle? You'll notice at the bottom here on the exemplar, I've added the black band just to remind you. Some of you have been taught to use the acronym PEAL, some of you TIDE, some of you RACES or ACE. Regardless, all of the elements are the same. These are just acronyms that help you to know and identify what the pieces are to that paragraph response, okay? So I'm going to read the exemplar, and you certainly may be thinking about your own paragraph. Where were you lacking? How could you improve? Anytime we look at an exemplar, we don't want to imitate it, especially when it's a writing response, but we definitely want to compare and contrast it against our response in measurement of quality, and did we answer every piece, and did I leave something out, and sentence structure and conventions as well. So how was he impacted by his decision to sell those rights? We want to restate the question, and the exemplar did that. Epperson is significantly changed. You hear that original idea, that claim, by his decision to sell the rights to the popsicle. The magnitude of his decision is shown in his statement. I haven't been the same since. And the exemplar, of course, cited paragraph 5. By choosing to sell the patent of his popsicle, Epperson also initiates the beginning of a journey of change for his invention. There's that elaboration piece. That's so important. Those elaboration pieces are your ideas, you elaborating, you extending the thinking past just the evidence, and you're thinking about how does this evidence support my original claim. For instance, Joe Low Company was the first but not the last company to own the rights to the popsicle, allowing them to make it their own. So you notice the writer mentioned the first company that bought the rights, but also added on and elaborated. It wasn't the last company, so the reader of this response would know, oh, there certainly was, there were some things going on in between there. And then the concluding sentence, Epperson's decision to sell the rights impacted him personally, but it also changed the legacy of the invention. So again, that higher order thinking, that analysis piece, taking it back to restating the idea in the claim, but making that final sentence stronger as the writer wrapped this particular response up. Hopefully this helped to reinforce your learning, and I am certain that you all did an excellent job on your assignments. Keep it up as you continue to learn away from your school campuses, okay? Thank you.